All right. So you ever have any mishaps while you're at work?
Oh, mishaps all the time.
Yeah.
People making mistakes left and right.
Like any of your patients fall or anything while you're having them do different exercises?
Not my patients. We have had a patient in the past working on some stair negotiation. You don't want a patient falling down the stairs during therapy. So this is the challenge with therapy. A lot of our patients, we're really trying to improve balance. And to improve balance, you do have to challenge balance. Just like you're trying to make a muscle stronger, you need to. And so you have to put people in precarious situations. Hopefully you're guarding them and it's safe. But every now and then something. So real quick, and then we'll move on. When I was early in my career, I was seeing someone out in Bono, and he was like a big dude, like over 400 pounds.
Whoa.
And
that's big.
We were going to work on some walk-in. Took it. I mean, he didn't like take a tumble, but he was going down, and he's just like, "Don't save me! You're gonna die!" And it was like he lived on a street with like several family members, like 4 family members. Couldn't get him up. Like fire department came because they know this guy by name. They're like, trying to get up again. Like, it was like 8 guys, like bed sheets in certain places. It was like a fiasco.
Oh man.
But I'll kick it to you. Mishaps on your end.
Yeah. So we're recording this on the Sunday that we just finished our Christmas house for the holidays things, and we had one mishap per show. 3 shows, there you go.
3
Were they
mishaps.
different
mishaps that you show? Like
different mishaps.
Nice.
So the first one, I have this eldest daughter. You may or may not know that she was running slides for the show.
Oh, I did not know that.
And we get there Friday evening. Everything is on.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
So I know where this is going.
And she got some extra duties to her. In her defense, she got some extra duties because she had to do some stuff that for the audience that wasn't normally because she's normally doing like our confidence screen so that we can see the words because in theory we have the lyrics memorized, but and so for the first 3 songs there were no lyrics for the people
so you're
singing.
Just hopefully you know them, but it's nice to have a safety net.
Right. And so how the show is, it's a lot of like solos and duets or quartets. So it was a men's quartet, a 2 ladies duo, and then a husband and wife. And I didn't hear anything. I was just sitting backstage oblivious till the husband and wife came back and they're like, she was like, no lyrics. And I was like,
this is the first night.
This was the first night.
Gotcha, yeah.
And she was like, oh, I'm sure, because my 2 solos are in the second act. She's like, I'm sure, your solos, and I'm sure they'll have it fixed by the second act. And I was like, I'm not worried about my solos because I have those memorized. But there's a place that we either, her husband sings another part where we either are singing with him or we echo. And it's like on our slides to remind us, okay, you're singing with him now, you're echoing. And it's like, I don't know that stuff. But the projector just was not turned on.
Man.
And she hadn't had to do that yet. So boom. Second night, we had these times where the ensemble's coming in and off the stage, and we try to do it fast because you want it quick. And this gal is coming off this. It's only maybe a 1 foot riser.
Okay.
Maybe
someone took a tumble.
And I think she was because we had to come around the corner, and I think maybe just the hem of her dress, got underneath her shoe, and she lost friction. Her feet just went right out from under. I was right behind her, so we picked her up and went. And I said something to some people who were in the audience. She's like, "We didn't see that at all or hear that at all." So it was kind of covered up.
That's
so it was good. And then tonight, or this afternoon, for some reason, that second act, the 2 ladies singing. Chestnuts Roasting on Open Fire.
One of my favorite
Christian
Christmas songs.
Yeah, mics were not on.
Nice.
So for a little bit.
No, I hate that. I mean, I know that stuff happens when you got a lot of mics running, but you always think like, why can't they have the mics on? But I know it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, and I know they're using cues. So for your AV folks, maybe only Aaron, but basically you have it set up how you want it, and then you're just going from Q1 to Q2 to Q3, and something must have gotten changed about that cue.
That's a bummer.
So then they have to look up. One, you have to realize the mics aren't on. Yeah. Then you have to go turn them on. So yeah.
I do want to. I'll point this out. Do you have video of any of what you did? Is that going to be available in any capacity? Did your wife sneak I'm going to record?
It said don't do any filming. I'm not aware of anyone that did filming. I did buy. So I think they record all 3 shows. And then my guess is they take the best version of each song
smart.
out of 3 shows, put it together, and release it.
Well, I was going to say we should go head to head because I don't know if you know about my background, but as a 4th grader at the Christian school I went to, did a pretty fancy solo in, it wasn't House for the Holidays, but it was called A Peanut Butter Christmas. and I'll see if I can pull that back. It's so embarrassing because I cannot sing, and I was like, 10 years old or something. But maybe I'll pull that up and we'll go head to head. Who sang it better?
4th grade?
From like 4th graders or like something.
Because 4th grade, I was Santa Claus in North Pole Goes Rock and Roll.
Wow.
And I have that on video too.
Wow. We should maybe post a bonus clip of that. I went to a Christian school that we would never do something called Santa and Rock and Roll. We'd be, whoa!
Yeah.
That's like double bad stuff.
Yeah. So this was like Santa. He wants to be cool. He's worried he's not cool. And I was the classic Santa. And then this other guy comes on and he plays the Santa that's trying to be cool, but it like just keeps failing and no one likes it. And then so they all want the classic Santa back. And then I come back and I just save the day.
Wow.
So,
Wow. Well,
North Pole Goes Rock and Roll.
I'm excited. I'm not excited to show any of my singing clip, but it's like hilarious because it's so bad. So I think the world needs to just make fun of me. So that'll be good. A lot of Christmas stuff.
Did you just get cast by your charisma alone?
Well, this is what happens when you have a class size of like 35 people in a class. You just get, and like the church school was connected. I was always doing stuff like with our church, and so it's just like you get picked for stuff, and then eventually, so it was those were the glory days.
We're never casting that hell kid again.
And then I never got a solo again. It was very strange. So I can all trace it back to this. But great stuff. Not as exciting as God's plan for Israel.
Yeah. Not clear, and not as really as important as God's plan for Israel.
It's definitely not. It's very forgettable, my solo. But join us as we're in. He said, Sermon 35.
Sermon 30. He said 35 weeks.
Oh, gotcha.
Because I was like 35. I think it's 35 weeks, but not Sermon 35. So I need to go back and count. I will count.
Yeah, we'll find the truth. We've been doing that a lot lately. Well, Romans 11, part 3, 17 through 33, God's plan for Israel. Let's take it to the next level. From the hearts of the Low Country in South Carolina,
it's the Take 2 podcast, where we take theology to the next level. All right, God's plan for Israel, part 3.
Man.
Finishing a major section of the book of Romans. Next time we're talking about Romans, man, it's going to be a therefore, and we're going to be like, because of all the last 11 chapters, because this is like, not only have there been sections in Romans, but this is most Pauline epistles have this huge dividing line: theology, and then application. How do we live in light of that? And so 11 ends this theology section of Romans. 12, it's this huge, therefore now how are we going to live in light of all that? So we're finishing up 11.
It's the end of an era. Are you telling me we're getting out the Jensen graph next week? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying the Jensen graph is probably going to be right here next week, and we're going to be talking about those different S's for salvation. Yeah.
And this is our third sermon alone in 11. If you look at the broader section 9 through 11, a lot of sermon spends. I do want to say, kind of a follow-up to our last sermon episode, did a little research. Watched a video from my good friend R.C. Sproul, who's no longer with us, and I just want to throw this out there. We should link the video or something. He was asked on a panel, how do you interpret Romans 11? And I was reading between the lines, but he preached a sermon. He referenced that he was in agreement with John MacArthur. This guy who's asking the questions was kind of like, are you sure you want to throw your eggs in that basket based on your Presbyterian, Mill, whatever? It's much different. And he just deadpan, straight face said, yeah, I've got the pre-mill understanding of Romans 11, just like John Calvin and Jonathan Edwards. And did he name drop someone else? I don't know, maybe just those two, but I was like, okay, so if you're going back to the Reformers, that's their view. I looked it up. Apparently, most of the Puritans thought this due to their post-millennial eschatology that the golden age was going to usher in the Jews, not in the same way pre-mill, is like getting worse and worse and worse. They're just getting better and better, but the same ends. Because I always kind of thought this was a dividing line of sorts, but apparently it's not.
Right. So just in case anyone missed it.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is R.C. Sproul, who are the other reformers?
John Calvin. Going back to the reformers.
Yeah.
And then Jonathan Edwards representing the Puritans.
Right. All take Romans 11 to refer to national ethnic Jews, Israel, not a spiritualized version of Israel.
Which is fascinating to me.
Right. So real Jewish ethnic people, physical descendants of Abraham, will have a major revival at some point in time at the end of the age of the Gentiles, wherever that is.
Which is pretty amazing, and they obviously would not go as far as to say, oh, these physical land promises are the same. They would, I would assume, spiritualize those and say, well, it's going to be bigger and better than what you're kind of thinking in your mind. Like Jerusalem is not maybe going to be, it might be different, but it was just interesting because I feel like Romans 11 gets thrown out there that it's like this huge difference.
Dividing line.
But maybe it's like down the line, when you take that logic and you run, that's where it happens.
Yeah, I would think Matthew 24-25 would be a dividing line.
Yeah.
I mean, I got the best of both sides because, there was probably clearly, there were Christians who escaped because they had read that when it was surrounded the first time, and then they were called off because Caesar died, and they came back. Like, that saved a lot of people. Clearly, there was a partial fulfillment then. So, yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, that just piqued my interest as we were going through it. And also threw out the question on the Theology Matters Facebook group, and no one embraced that position.
No one took the hook that it was not. And I don't know how you could, since the foil are Gentiles, So I just don't know how you could interpret it any other way. All right, the universe. It's big.
It is big. A lot is happening. We spent some time, trying to get our bearings. Threw out some facts. Charlie
did you know
was
the
on
speed of light? I had my hand raised and I did not get called.
I don't know a lot. I'm in a science field. I don't know a lot, but I feel like that's one of those things like not everyone knows, but the sun's 93 million miles. That's about if you didn't learn anything in science class in fourth grade, that's like the things you learned.
93 million miles away, 8 minutes for the light of the sun to get here, and the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. So those are things you should know.
I feel like I don't know a lot, but those things stuck. And Pastor did go to great lengths to be like, universe is incredible and huge and gigantic, and we don't know the half of it.
Yeah. I got several questions about dark matter, and dark energy on the way home. But the point of it is the universe is incomprehensible. Like, we can't really understand it. The Milky Way is 100,000 light years across.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah.
100 billion stars in our galaxy alone.
Man.
Somewhere between 200 billion to 2 trillion galaxies. I know you're not into maybe looking at stars and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But go look at some of the new James Webb pictures, because what used to look like just a square of black, of black in this, tiny square of black. They blow that up, and it's just like a sea of galaxies that you can see. That it's crazy, and that's one tiny little, and that's everywhere. Man. So trillions and trillions of galaxies, incomprehensible, and that's what we're going to talk about today, because our passage today is going to end with this verse: "Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and the knowledge of God. How unsearchable, just like a galaxy, are his judgments, and unfathomable his ways."
Yeah, you get through this whole section. I feel like if you're not ending up where Paul's ending up, you're missing something, or you're doing one of these things that Paul says, don't do that, that we'll talk about soon.
That's right.
Because this passage does humble us, particularly those who are Gentiles, who might have the propensity to get arrogant, be like, these Jews just don't get it.
Yeah.
We're so smart. That would be the wrong answer. So we've been working our way through this chapter 11, God's future plans for Israel. And we're going to zoom out, get our bearings. There's two major questions that we're looking at in this chapter. Verse 1 starts off with the question, God hasn't rejected his people, has he? May it never be. Uses Paul. Paul talks about, hey, I'm here. Elijah also, had that remnant. And then in verse 11 kind of starts a new question that these Jews, they didn't stumble as to fall, did they? Again, saying, may it never be that they're not totally down for the count.
Yeah, and we ended last week arguing with this lesser to greater. Verses 12 and verses 15. Now, if their transgression is riches for the world and their failure is riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their fulfillment be? For if their rejection is the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? So this man, if God can do these amazing things through the failure of the Jews,
wow,
how much more can he do when he brings them back and he sanctifies this remnant?
And again, if we're thinking of 9 through 11 as this section, in verse 9, he's kind of arguing, has the word of God failed? Why is this the case in Romans 11? What's going on? If you back up to verse 16, there's these promises made to the patriarchs. Verse 16 says that if the first piece of dough is holy, the lump is also. And if the root is holy, the branches are too. Right. I just love the thought of like holy dough, But the idea is these patriarchs, there were promises made long ago, and because of this, because of God's character, he's going to see these things through. He's not going to say, that was a long time ago. I think everyone forgot about that. No one's going to know. It's like, no. He's got to continue on with the Jewish people.
Speaking of holy dough, I've made some sour bread in my day.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't made it recently, but we got some sour bread from Catherine Petters.
Ooh, how was it? I bet it's good.
Chloe has had my sour bread, and she said this was the best bread she's ever eaten in her life.
Wow.
So there you go.
I'm thinking.
There you go, Catherine.
I don't know if Catherine's got a name for a company, but she should call it Holy Dough.
Holy Dough.
Romans 11:16 is like the tagline. This is Holy Dough. And she should sponsor the podcast.
That's
hey.
right. That's right. Yeah, that'd be great. So, all right. So we're going to read some longer passages, but then we'll comment on them. So we're moving through the rest of Romans 11. So this is 17 through 24. And this is going to be talking about this olive tree and the fact that it was pruned. Some of those branches went away, and we added some in. But guess what? Some of those branches could be added back in. So here we go.
That's right.
But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive, were grafted in among them and became partaker with them of the rich root of the olive tree, do not be arrogant towards the branches. But if you are arrogant, remember that it is not you who supports the root, but the root supports you. You will say then, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. Quite right, they were broken off for their unbelief, but you stand by your faith. Do not be conceited, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Behold then the kindness and severity of God. To those who fell, severity, but to you, God's kindness. If you continue in his kindness, otherwise, you will also be cut off. And they also, if they do not continue in their unbelief, will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. For if you were cut off from what is by nature a wild olive tree, and were grafted contrary to nature in a cultivated olive tree, how much more will those who are natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree?
It's a big paragraph. We'll kind of look at piece by piece, or these key phrases. The first one that stands out, you're reading, happens a couple times.
Yeah.
Paul says, don't be arrogant, verse 18. Then just a few verses later, verse 20, he says, don't be conceited. Actually, instead of being conceited, you should fear. Like that should be your response, because you can read this easily and say like, wow, man, they've rejected God. Good. I mean, great for me. I'm awesome. They're missing the boat. But if that's your takeaway, you're totally missing the point, because if this thing happened to the Jews, guess what?
Yeah.
It could happen to you.
Yeah. And we were talking a little bit about this after the last podcast, just as we were chatting and wrapping up after we were done recording. And I haven't used ChatGPT to try to find this, but I know I've only Googled it before ChatGPT. But I know Dennis Prager, Jewish talk show host, he did something where he went through a series of countries through history that went up against Jews, tried to annihilate them.
Oh, yeah.
And then the downfall that they had afterwards. We can think, probably Spain is not on most people's minds as a superpower. At one point in time, they were the world superpower, had the Spanish Armada, like they owned the seas, Spanish Armada taken down. That happened after the Spanish Inquisition. And Spanish Inquisition was, they killed a lot of non-Catholics, including a lot of Jews. Germany, we can think of after World War II being brought down, kind of just now, getting back on their feet in the past 20 years or so. And I'll try to find other nations that, because he had a list and list, and I was like kind of overwhelmed by it, but I don't remember all of them. But
yeah,
I mean, you see, this kind of practically still happening.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Just to think, should your response be? It should lead you to where Paul goes, that incomprehensibility more than, hey, I'm so great.
Right.
Because Paul's, when he's kind of applying this, he says, you need to take into account the kindness and the severity of God. There's both of these things at play, and you're experiencing God's kindness, but God's also severe too. So don't get haughty, don't get conceited, because you could literally be at the mercy of God.
Yep. And if you've never seen a video of someone grafting in a branch,
it's cool.
It is cool. They do it at a lot of fruit trees and stuff. But yeah, you can go see that. And there has to be a particular match. And I think that's the point Paul's making. Like, hey, if God is able to take these wild things and graft them into the root, how much more can he regraft in some of the originals to that tree? And so that is within God's ability. And so application, just like you were saying, we need to dwell on both the kindness and the severity of God. And man, if God can be kind to others, we should be too.
No, that is a good takeaway. It's, the opposite of I'm arrogant. It's like, no, I need to be kind because I've been extended so much mercy. We see Paul kind of appealing to this in even other parts of Scripture. You look at 2 Corinthians 9, he's making this case for, giving, cheerful giving. Really, at the end of his motivations, the primary motivation is thanks be to God for his indescribable gift. God's a great gift giver. We can give gifts too. And so at the end of the day, humility is the name of the game. It's not pride.
Yeah, and see we have 3, 2, 1 here listed. I mean, that's a good application, especially if you're a member at CBC. But I mean, this season makes it easy to be kind. Like maybe we can challenge one another and our listeners. Try to find a way to be kind, to show someone the love of God.
I think that is great. It just lends itself. It's just right there. It's only going to get harder. It can't be like, oh, Labor Day's coming up. Like, hey, in the spirit of Labor, it's like, man, Christmas just makes it easy. So that's that first section, first paragraph, 17 through 25. We're going to shift gears to verses 25 through 33. I will read at least the first couple of verses as Paul talks about this mystery. Paul writes, "For I don't want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation, that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel will be saved. Just as it's written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will remove ungodliness from Jacob. This is my covenant with them when I take away their sins."
No, that's good. So that was 25 through 27. Paul references there a mystery. And hopefully if you're a student of the Bible, Paul uses this word more than one time throughout the New Testament. And what Paul means when he says that is, this is a truth previously hidden, now brought to light and revealed. So it's not like the Gnostic mysteries, like the secret knowledge, hidden knowledge. It's open now, but it was previously unknown.
Yeah.
And that was the fact that, man, there was going to be this age of the Gentiles, basically. That's what some people have called it. Some people call it the church age.
Yeah.
But this time when Gentiles are going to be coming to faith, and at the end of that time, we don't know what that is. We don't know what triggers it. But then there's going to be this revival among Israel, and every single Israelite will be saved. I mean, is that how we should understand this all?
Well, so this is really good to talk about, because a lot hangs on this all. Right. Where if we're looking, in other places, I could say, everyone in America loves ice cream.
Yeah.
And I might mean like a lot of America, but there's always one in the crowd. I'm dairy free or whatever.
Or
you know what I'm talking
Somerville
about.
was out for this event.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's a common way we speak. What I want to hit on too with this, it says all Israel, literally right before it says a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of Gentiles come in. So we see Israel versus Gentiles. And then this is like where people spiritualize it. Apparently not that many people, since R.C. Sproul doesn't, John Calvin doesn't, John Edwards. But this is the place where I see people are like, oh, that's everyone who's saved. But I'm like, we're just talking about ethnic Israel. That's clear. I mean, I could see, well,
by definition, spiritual Israel is saved. So it doesn't make that'd be like me saying X is X. Yeah. So it only makes sense for me to say that all Israel will be saved. If national / ethnic Israel, and obviously we can't take all to the extreme. We gave some examples where we limit all in our understanding, but there's going to be a very large revival among Jewish people.
I think that's hard. Just Paul lays it out so well. It's hard to miss that. If we're continuing on in Romans, in verse 28, Paul writes, from the standpoint of the gospel, they are I don't know if is that scripture or enemies for your sake, but from the standpoint of God's choice, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers, for the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. Yeah. That's great. I didn't know if that was, to me it looks shorter than 5 verses, but maybe it is just a couple in there. Maybe it's just 28 and 29.
Yeah. I think I did not update the end. It's 28 and 29. Cool. Yeah. Do you want to read it again, maybe?
I'll read it. 28 and 29, from the standpoint of the gospel, they're enemies for your sake, but from the standpoint of God's choice, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. And Paul's really appealing. I like how he ends that. Yeah. If God says something's going to happen, guess what? It's going to happen.
Yeah, and our verses just above ended with, this is my covenant with them. And then these verses end with, the calling of God are irrevocable. We've talked about this before, but there are some promises that God made that were unconditional. Like, I am going to bring this about. It doesn't depend on you. And because of those, and if you look, if you read through, the Deuteronomy 29, 28, there's also a place, I think it's in Numbers. But we could, you can look it up. But basically says, when you turn away from me, I'm going to do all these bad things to you, but I will remember you because of the sake of your forefathers. Like, because of my covenant with them, I'm not going to utterly destroy you. And it's like he's saying the same thing to them now. Like, you're broken off branches, but I'm not going to forget you utterly. Like, there's going to come a time where, because of those promises, I'm going to bring you back.
No, I think you nailed it. That it's clear that because of these promises, God's not done with Israel. At some point in the future, all Israel will be saved. We qualified that because the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. Paul continues, and we're making our way quickly now towards the end of this chapter. Paul writes, for just as you once were disobedient to God, but now have been shown mercy because of their disobedience, so these also now have been disobedient, that because of the mercy shown to you, they also may now be shown mercy. For God has shut up all in disobedience, so that he may show mercy to all. Oh, the depths of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments, and unfathomable his ways. And as you're reading that, you can just hear the words disobedient and mercy just kind of like pop up over and over and over again.
Yeah, and it harkens back to me, chapter 9. I want to mercy who I want to mercy. And God, ultimately, it doesn't depend on the man who runs, but on God who shows mercy. And so, we had these Gentiles who were far off, and God says, you know what? I'm going to make them an object of my mercy. And Israel, because of your disobedience, I'm going to, break off the branches for a while, but then you know what? I'm going to make you an object of my mercy. And God's going to get glory out of how he does that for both the Gentiles and then comes back around for the Jews.
That's pretty amazing. It's, from our vantage point, hard to see everything, but man, so much mercy. We've got this illustration, Pastor Joel, gave us from Andrei Stamos, this Hungarian soldier captured by Russians in the 1940s. He was basically declared, this guy's just mumbling gibberish. He's clearly insane, was the thinking at the time. He was in a psychiatric ward. Many years later, he's 75 years old. He's been in confinement 55 years. And what they found out was actually he speaks like this like obscure dialect. Like he's not insane. That would be just the worst.
Oh, man. Can't communicate. You're trying to talk to somebody. They won't give you the time of day. If I understood what Joel said, all this was in solitary confinement.
Yeah, that's
75 years or 55 years.
Man, I can't imagine.
Yeah,
that's incredible. And first thing he asked upon being released, what was a mirror, and just seeing yourself. I was like, seeing myself from like my early 20s to now would be jarring. I can't imagine like 20 to 75. Man.
Yeah. I posted a picture of my because Navy beat Army. So I posted a picture of me in my ensign uniform, and I always get comments like, "Whoa," and what was that? 20 years? So now we're talking about 55 years.
Yeah,
it's crazy. The point is, God wants all of us to see our sinful brokenness, just like that man looked at his face, and man, how his face was ravaged by that mistreatment and the sobbing tears that it brought. We should look at ourselves in the mirror of God's word, see our sinfulness, see our brokenness, be brought to tears, and then marvel at the unfathomable, unsearchable mercy that God has shown us.
Yeah, that's the name of the game. Totally getting away from this pride, arrogance, conceits. And there's no better way to end chapter 11 than with this great doxology. Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and unfathomable his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who became his counselor, or who was first given to him that it might be paid back to him again? For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen. And so he's really hitting it from every aspect here. That who are you? From what you can see, you don't know what's going on with God. He can see everything much more clearly than we can.
Yeah, and Joel's give us a little insight into this word. Unsearchable means to have no footprints, or no footprints, be untraceable, beyond our understanding, and ends with this idea of to him be the glory forever. Amen.
Wow.
And we had this quote from Ventura. I'll read it. It says, "What is Paul's point in these final words? It is this: since God is the author of all things," in the verses for from him, and since God is the agent of all things, the quote is, and through him, and God is the aim of all things, and the quote is, and to him, he alone is the sole focus of our worship and praise for all things.
Man, great way to end this sermon. Looking at application, it's really simple. Marvel at the right things.
Yeah.
It's easy for us to just be captivated by things that really don't matter, or even worse, missing the point, taking the glory off of God. And I love that the emphasis has been on context, and 9 through 11 all goes together, because there are some hard things, but it's like, man, at the end of the day, it just should glorify God.
And I appreciate Joel's focus on keeping the text saying what the text is, because I can imagine someone, myself included, being tempted to kind of, okay, we're talking about the end times here.
Yeah, right.
Let's railroad a whole bunch of what we think is going to happen. Not saying that that's a bad discussion, but that's not where Paul goes. Yeah. Paul goes from, God's not done with Israel. Man, we need to worship God. We need to marvel at who he is.
Yeah, some may have hoped that Paul would say, and I'm pre-mill, and then go into this doxology. But he didn't. And
he didn't say that.
That's instructive,
Yeah. All right, anything else to add?
End of a section.
Woo. It feels like it's the end of an era, because
it does.
It's like we're turning that corner, and it's not downhill from here, but it's, we can see the end inside of Romans. Yeah. Man,
wow. Well, 32 sermons down. How many more do you think we got? 12 through 16.
I would say, I'm assuming we're going to wrap 16 up in one, but I don't know. Sometimes we can. Knows? Yeah. I don't know how Joel's going to handle all those names and the different correspondences, because then, like the last chapter of Galatians towards the end, you know, Paul can be like, let me slip in some theology here, and then I'm going to say goodbye.
I was actually looking at Pastor has some notes for 16 done.
Oh,
and one of his sermons it's called Overrated Names. It's interesting. I don't know. Oh, is your daughter?
How did you get to peek it?
Is your daughter on that list?
Overrated names.
I'm just kidding.
I was like, how did you? One, I'm amazed that Joel already has notes for chapter 16. Two, how did you get to see them? But now the joke, overrated names. All right. Okay, I'll tell Phoebe.
I'm just
I'll tell
kidding.
Julian.
Great names. Great names all around. But I got nothing else. What about you?
I think I'm good.
That's our take. Thanks for listening to Take Two. Find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube for those who want to watch our video cast.